Most people believe billion-dollar companies start with brilliant ideas and flawless execution. But here is the shocking truth. Most of the companies that changed the world looked like bad ideas at first. Think about it. Amazon lost money for years as a bookstore. Tesla, they nearly went bankrupt more than once. And NVIDIA, today worth over $4 trillion, almost died in its very first decade. So what's the lesson here? Success in deep tech is not about perfection. It's about turning what looks like madness into inevitability. And that's why for today's book review, I have chosen this book, The NVIDIA Way by Tae Kim. Kim doesn't just recount a business story. He unpacks how Jensen Huang built one of the most important companies of our time, not just by designing chips, but by designing culture, vision, and resilience. For founders, board members, and venture capitalists between Series A and IPO, this book is a playbook. And in this episode, I will share 7 lessons that matter most. First one, why pain is your greatest teacher. Why your reputation is your first product. How to avoid the innovator's dilemma. How to lead with context and not control. Why vision matters more than features. How culture outruns capital. And finally, how urgency keeps you alive. Each lesson comes with a real NVIDIA story from the book, insights from today's market, and coaching questions you can apply immediately. Because this show is not just about learning what others did, it's about helping you think, act, and scale differently starting today. So let's dive in. What's the big idea of the book, The NVIDIA Way? If you remember just one thing from The NVIDIA Way, let it be this. NVIDIA didn't just build chips, they built inevitabilities. And that's the heartbeat of Tae Kim's book. Success in deep tech is not about chasing trends or staking features. It's about designing a future that must exist and surviving long enough to meet it. Think about NVIDIA's story arc. They were not the first graphics card company. They were not the best storytellers. Their first 2 products nearly killed them. But instead of copying what was fashionable, they made painful, long-term bets that looked crazy in the moment, like pouring resources into CUDA when almost nobody cared. But those irrational bets became inevitabilities. And that's the lesson for anyone scaling from Series A to IPO. For founders, it is your first product won't make you great. Your culture, your resilience, and your willingness to play the long game well. And for investors, don't just back clever ideas. Back leaders who build inevitabilities, leaders paranoid enough to survive and patient enough to create categories no one sees yet. And NVIDIA's story is a mirror. You don't need to be in semiconductors to see yourself in it. Every founder, every board faces the same dilemmas: capital pressure, talent density, product failures, and cultural discipline. So, if the intro was about why this book matters, this section is about the lens. The NVIDIA Way is a playbook for turning pain into resilience, reputation into capital, culture into a moat, and vision into inevitability. Because if you can internalize that one truth, that greatness comes from building inevitabilities, not chasing perfection, then every lesson in the rest of this episode becomes a tool to help you get there. Before we dive into the lessons, let's pause and ask, why should you trust this book? Who is Tae Kim and why is the NVIDIA Way worth your time? Let's start with the first question. Who is Tae Kim? He is not your typical business book author. He's a veteran technology journalist and former equity analyst. A rare mix that gives him both the storytelling craft of a journalist and the financial lens of Wall Street. He has written as a senior technology writer at Barron's and as a US tech columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Before that, he worked as an equity analyst at hedge funds and in management consulting. This dual background means he can break down NVIDIA's rise not only as a story of engineering, but as a case study in markets, strategy, and execution. So, why is he the right person to tell this story? What sets him apart is access and depth. He spent more than a year researching NVIDIA, conducting over 100 interviews, including with Jensen Huang, co-founders Chris Malachowski, and Curtis Brim, earlier employees, senior executives, and the venture capitalists who backed the company. Former insiders said they were thrilled someone finally told their story in full length. Kim pieced together oral histories, validated them with archival material, and captured boardroom conversations, product decisions, and cultural insights you won't find anywhere else. And the recognition shows. Chris Miller, author of Chip War, calls the book a riveting history. Morgan Housel, author of The Psychology of Money, describes it as the definitive look at one of the most remarkable business stories of this era. Even former NVIDIA leaders have praised it for capturing the company's culture and strategy better than any prior account. So, why does his perspective matter for you? For founders and investors, Kim's perspective is valuable because he doesn't just write about strategy at 30,000 feet high. He zooms in on the habits, decisions, and cultural patterns that made NVIDIA resilient. How they survived near-death failures, structured their teams, kept urgency alive, and created inevitabilities like CUDA. He's not writing like an academic. He's not spinning public relations. He's dissecting NVIDIA from both sides, as a storyteller and as an analyst. So when you hear the NVIDIA Way, you're not just reading another tech biography. You're hearing deeply reported, cross-checked insights that tie directly to the challenges of scaling from Series A to IPO towards a $4 trillion market cap goal. So imagine sitting across from someone who's covered NVIDIA for years, who knows its failures as well as its triumphs, and who can connect those lessons straight into your boardroom. And that's Tae Kim. Now that you know why this book and this author deserve your attention, let's move into the first of 7 lessons where NVIDIA's story becomes a practical playbook for scaling. Pain and suffering are the recipe for greatness. We have all heard the stories. The prodigy who gets everything right. The founder with the silver spoon who sails to success thanks to his family's money. But what if that narrative is simply a lie? What if the real secret to greatness is not IQ or privilege, but resilience? Resilience forged through pain. And that's the first lesson of the NVIDIA Way. In his 2017 commencement address, Jensen Huang told graduates, I wish upon you ample doses of pain and suffering. You find the reference in the book on page 18. It's not exactly the motivational poster line you would expect, but his point was clear. Greatness is not intelligence. Greatness comes from character, and character can only be the result of overcoming setbacks and adversity. And his life proves it. As a teenager, he was sent to a vocational boarding school in Kentucky, essentially a reform school, where he endured bullying and hardship. Later, he washed dishes and waited tables to pay his way. Out of those experiences came what he calls a street fighter mentality. And it didn't stop there. In business, NVIDIA's first 2 chips, the NV1 and NV2, were flops. Huang admitted, you didn't build NV1 because you were great. You didn't build NV2 because you were great. We survived ourselves. We were our own worst enemy. You find it on page 4. But most companies would have died right there. Founders would have simply given up. NVIDIA didn't. They endured, they learned, and they came back stronger. Too many founders today tell themselves, my life was too tough, and that's why I could not succeed. But the truth is, adversity is normal and it is an advantage if you persist. Investors should not just look for IQ, they should look for battle scars because those scars prove resilience. They prove you can take a hit and keep moving forward. Amazon lost money for years before AWS became an empire. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple before he came back and reshaped it into the world's most valuable company. NVIDIA nearly died twice before CUDA made it indispensable. So if you're scaling from Series A to IPO, resilience is not optional. It's your moat. And I've seen this pattern again and again. The founders who impress me most aren't the ones with flawless resumes. They're the ones who can point to a scar, tell the story behind it, and show how it made them sharper. And the NVIDIA way reminds us pain endured and transformed compounds into greatness. So here are my coaching questions. The first one, how do you respond to setbacks? Do they harden you or weaken you? The second one, where in your company are you letting fear of failure slow down progress? And the third one, are you surrounding yourself with leaders who have been tested under fire or only those who look good on paper? Greatness is not about avoiding pain. It's about taking it and transforming it into something better. So if your journey feels unfair, if it feels brutally hard, don't see it as a reason to quit. See it as a proof you're in training for something much bigger. And here we are, lesson number 2. Your reputation is your currency. Most founders obsess over perfecting their pitch deck. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Your pitch will almost certainly suck the very first time. Even NVIDIA, today's $4 trillion giant, nearly bombed its very first meeting with Sequoia Capital. This was the fund that backed them in the early days. What saved them was not the brilliance of their slides. It was simply their reputation. Here is the full story. In the early 90s, Jensen Huang and his co-founders pitched Don Valentine, one of Silicon Valley's toughest and most respected venture capitalists. And the result? A disaster. By Jensen's own admission, I did a horrible job with the pitch. I had a hard time explaining what I was building, who I was building it for, and why I was going to be successful. You find the full story on page 48 in the book. Valentine, he hated product demos and grilled them instead. Their answers were incoherent, sometimes even contradicting each other. By our logic, NVIDIA should have been dead on arrival. But then came the call. Wilf Corrigan, a respected semiconductor veteran and former CEO of LSI Logic, vouched for Jensen personally. He did not pitch the idea of NVIDIA. He pitched the CEO, Jensen Huang. Corrigan staked his entire reputation on Huang. And Valentine relented. Wilf says to give you money against my better judgment, based on what you just told me. I'm going to give you money. But if you lose my money, I will come and kill you. And that credibility turned disaster into a $2 million Series A investment. And as the book puts it, Your reputation will precede you even if your business plan writing skills are inadequate. The lesson is blunt. In the earliest days, your reputation is your first product. Long before your technology works or your market exists, people are betting on you, on your integrity, on your resilience, and the people willing to vouch for you. For venture capitalists, this is the filter. Don't just judge the deck. Ask whose credibility is standing behind the founder. Pedigree and polish don't always predict winners, but a network willing to go to bat for someone, that does. I once sat in a pitch meeting where the slides were shaky, the story was rough, but one of the investors in the room leaned over and whispered, "I would back this founder any day." And that's the power of reputation. It's slow to build, it's fast to lose. And in deep tech, especially, where cycles are long and capital intensive, it may be the single most valuable currency you have. Here are my coaching questions for you. The first one: is your personal reputation today an asset or a liability? Who in your circle would confidently stake their reputation on you, and why? What are you doing daily to expand and protect that credibility beyond polishing a pitch deck? NVIDIA didn't raise its first millions because of a perfect pitch. They raised because someone trusted Jensen enough to put their own reputation on the line. Your technology will change, your pitch will evolve, but your reputation, that's the one product you carry with you into every room. So build it wisely. Lesson number 3: the innovator's dilemma will come for you. The paradox in business is this: the very success that makes you strong can also make you blind. Blockbuster ignored streaming. Kodak, they missed digital entirely. And Intel dismissed GPUs. And this is the innovator's dilemma. And it nearly claimed NVIDIA too. But instead of doubling down on what worked, Jensen Huang forced the company into a bet so radical, so costly, that many thought it would kill them. And in reality, it saved them and created this tremendous success story. But what's the story behind it? By the early 2000s, NVIDIA was a rising graphics company, riding the PC gaming wave with hits like the Riva 128. You find more in the book on page 73. But Huang knew graphics alone couldn't secure the future. So in 2006, he launched CUDA, a proprietary software ecosystem that let scientists and developers program GPUs for parallel computing. On paper, it looked like a terrible idea. The market was tiny: researchers, labs, niche scientific applications. Analysts, they mocked it. Even inside NVIDIA, employees questioned why they were pouring money into what looked like a science project. You can read it on page 143. The cost was brutal. CUDA added a ton of cost into our chips and dragged gross margins from 45% to 35%. And then came the 2008 financial crisis. NVIDIA stock collapsed by more than 80%. Investors begged Huang to cut CUDA. But he refused. We had a very few customers for CUDA, but we made every chip CUDA compatible. And that conviction became NVIDIA's moat. A decade later, when deep learning exploded, CUDA was the only ecosystem already ready. Google, OpenAI, universities, biotech labs all turned to NVIDIA. What once looked like a reckless gamble became the foundation of a $4 trillion company. And meanwhile, at Intel, laser focused on quarterly performance, they missed the wave entirely. And this is the real innovator's dilemma. Do you optimize for the next quarter or the next decade? NVIDIA's early chips kept the lights on, but CUDA, the long shot, margin killing bet, created inevitability. You see the same patterns in other giants. Amazon went from being an online bookstore to AWS, the backbone of cloud computing. Microsoft went from the Office suite to Azure and artificial intelligence. Great companies don't just ship features, they create categories. They disrupt themselves before someone else does. So when I sit with founders, I often ask, what's your CUDA? What's your moat in the future, in the next 10 years? What's the crazy long-term bet you are making, the one only you believe in? Because if all I hear are incremental features and why they are slightly better than what their competitors are doing and the big incumbents, I already know how the story ends. The company will stall the moment competition catches up. So here are my three coaching questions for you. Are you building inevitabilities or just shipping features? Do you ship good enough products to learn fast, or are you paralyzed chasing perfection like 3D And the third one, what's your CUDA? The long-term bet only you are crazy enough to make. The innovator's dilemma will come for you for sure. The only question is whether you will fall into it, like Intel, or build the future no one else is brave enough to chase. Lesson number 4, lead with context and not control. As companies scale, most CEOs fall into the same trap. They try to control everything. Every decision runs through them. Every approval needs their stamp, and the result? Speed dies and innovation stalls. Jensen Huang flipped the script. Instead of control, he built systems of context, turning thousands of NVIDIA employees into decisive operators, each acting like the CEO of their own account. And that's how NVIDIA scaled at startup speed while growing into a $4 trillion company. Two management practices capture this perfectly. First, the top 5 email system. Every week, from executives down to engineers, NVIDIA employees send a short note listing their top 5 priorities and market observations. Read more about it on page 168 in the book. And Jensen reads all of those emails. This creates what he calls a mind meld with the company, real-time visibility into what matters without endless layers of reporting or meetings. And the second is the pilot in command model. Borrowed from aviation, it makes one person explicitly accountable for each project. No diffusion of responsibility, no hiding behind teams. The pilot in command owns the outcome, just as a captain owns a flight, no matter how many co-pilots are on board. Together, these systems create clarity without micromanagement. People know what matters, and they know who owns it. This is gold for any company moving from Series A toward IPO. Growth means complexity. More people, more meetings, more politics. If you don't build systems for clarity, you drown in bureaucracy. Huang's method shows the alternative. Hire A players and train your P players into A's. Give them context, not constant instructions. Demand accountability, but pair it with trust. It's how special forces operate. Small, allied teams empowered by mission clarity. Huang designed NVIDIA's organization to work the same way. So when I work with founders, I often ask, would your team still act decisively if you disappeared for a month? If the answer is no, then you're over-controlling. Your company depends on you instead of its operating system. Context replaces control, and that's how you scale without losing speed. So here are my 3 coaching questions for you. What's your top 5 system? How do you create clarity without bottlenecks? Where are you over-controlling instead of setting context? Would your team act decisively if you disappeared for a month? Jensen Huang doesn't try to be everywhere. He builds systems that scale his leadership. He leads with context, not control, and that's why NVIDIA keeps moving like a startup, even as one of the most valuable companies on planet Earth. Here is lesson number 5. Don't just sell the product, sell the vision. A product can be a marvel of engineering and still fail. Why does that happen? Because a market doesn't buy features, it buys a story. The greatest innovations aren't just built, they are branded into existence. This is the 5th lesson from the NVIDIA Way, and it's a masterclass in market creation. In the late 90s, the graphics card market was a mess of confusing and competing terms. Jensen Huang knew that technical specifications alone would not sell a chip. He needed a simple, powerful message to stand out. His marketing team came up with a bold new term, the graphic processing unit, or short GPU. At the time, the hardware didn't fully meet the technical definition of the term. The engineers at NVIDIA were skeptical, but marketing executive Dan Vivoli pushed the name forward, saying, "We decided to take a leap, make a stretch that this is a GPU." He also made a stunning decision. He did not trademark the term. He wanted other companies to use it to turn the GPU from a product name into a new category entirely. And the gamble worked. The GPU became an industry standard with NVIDIA positioned as its creator and leader. And as the book notes, Hyperbole would become reality. The GPU moniker became an industry standard and helped NVIDIA sell hundreds of millions of cards in the ensuing decades. By branding a new category, NVIDIA didn't have to compete with anyone else. They were creating a market of their own. And this is one of the most overlooked founder skills. Markets don't follow features, they follow narratives. A founder's job is to brand inevitability, not just specifications. When you define a category, you are not just building a product, you are teaching the market to think in your terms. And this is what Amazon did with AWS. They did not just sell servers, they branded the inevitability of the cloud. It's what Tesla did with its mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. And it's what NVIDIA did by selling the GPU as the brain of the future. Founders who define categories play a different game. They don't compete for shelf space. They expand the shelf itself. For investors, this is the lens. Look for founders who sell inevitability, not just incremental products. I have learned that the power of a single word or phrase is immeasurable. The narrative you create for your company will determine whether you are seen as a commodity or a category creator. Too many founders are afraid to make a bold claim or to be too far ahead of the market. But the NVIDIA way reminds me that a little bit of marketing embellishment, backed by a strong vision, can transform a company from a competitor into a pioneer. I remember sitting with a group of investors once watching two startups pitch back to back. One showed a detailed slide deck with benchmarks, performance graphs, and comparisons to competitors. The other spent 15 minutes describing a future world that couldn't exist without their technology. And guess which one we kept talking about over dinner? It was not the product with the specifications. It was the big, bold vision. Specs fade, stories stick. So let's turn this insight from lesson 5 into action. Ask yourself and your team these 3 questions. Are you defining a category or are you just competing in one? What one word or phrase should the market associate with your company? How are you teaching investors and customers to think in your terms? NVIDIA didn't just sell a chip. They sold the story of what the chip could be. Your product may be great, but your vision is what will make you a leader. Here is lesson number 6. Culture outruns capital and the competition. Money buys you time, but culture decides whether you waste it. And this is where most founders fool themselves. They raise millions, sometimes billions, and assume the capital itself is the moat. But the truth is brutal. Capital without culture only prolongs decline. Culture without capital, that can turn even a small startup into a juggernaut. And NVIDIA proved it time and time again. So, in the late 90s, NVIDIA's fiercest competitor was a company called 3DFX. On paper, 3DFX should have won. They had cash, early market leadership, and engineering brilliance. But inside the company, politics, endless debates, perfectionism, and what Tae Kim calls feature creep. What that is, you find on page 138 in their book. They aimed for flawless products, but missed deadlines. The market simply moved on. NVIDIA, by contrast, built what Jensen Huang called a speed of light culture. The rules were clear. Move fast, give and receive blunt feedback, kill politics, reward performance with equity, not just salary. Every employee was expected to act like an owner. Those who excelled got real equity stakes, shares that could change their lives if the company succeeded. Those who underperformed couldn't hide behind titles or in teams. As one executive recalled, at NVIDIA, accountability was total. You could fail, but you could not be political. And the outcome? NVIDIA out-executed 3DFX, acquired them for scraps in 2000 and never looked back. Culture, not capital, decided the race. And this is why culture is the true operating system of a company. Money buys runway, but only culture creates velocity. It's culture that determines whether decisions happen in a week or drag on for months, whether employees share information or hoard it, whether people stay late because they are inspired and willing or because they are afraid. Look at the greats. Amazon's day one urgency, Netflix freedom and responsibility, Tesla's maniacal focus on mission. Their cultures, not their bank accounts, build empires. For founders between Series A and IPO, this is the critical shift. You are not just building products, you are building habits to scale. For VCs, the lesson is simple. Diligence the culture, not just the cap table. When I walk into a company, I can feel the culture before I see the numbers. It's in how people talk to each other, how quickly they make decisions, whether they solve problems or stall them, and especially what they say about other people when they are not in the room. And here is the litmus test I often use. If I interviewed your ex-employees, what would they say about your culture? That answer is more predictive of your future than any spreadsheet. Because people don't remember your pitch deck. They remember whether your culture made them better or burned them out. And eventually the market reflects that truth. So here are my 3 coaching questions for you to close out this chapter. Do you reward ownership with equity or just salaries? Where does politics still slow down decisions in your company? Is your culture designed to produce excellence or comfort? Capital gets you a chance. Culture decides the outcome. NVIDIA didn't just outspend its rivals, it out-executed them. And in the long run, culture outruns everything. Lesson number 7, build urgency into the system. Success is dangerous. The moment you feel safe is the moment you are already in decline. And that's why Jensen Huang has spent 3 decades repeating the same mantra to his team. We are only 30 days away from going out of business. Even when NVIDIA was soaring, he spoke as if they were on the brink of collapse. Because complacency, not competition, is what kills great companies. Huang's paranoia wasn't paranoia at all. It was strategy. He told employees, we are just one bad decision away from obsolescence. This mindset shaped how NVIDIA reinvested. When analysts begged him to focus on short-term profit, he doubled down on CUDA, knowing full well it was dragging margins from 45% to 35%. The bet nearly broke the company, but it forced reinvention. And that's the pattern. NVIDIA never rests. Their early failures with NV1 and NV2 nearly killed them. Their near collapse during the 2008 financial crisis crushed their stock by 80%. But each time, they acted as if survival was on the line and reinvented themselves before the market forced them to. And the result? When AI exploded, NVIDIA wasn't scrambling. They were already there because urgency was baked into the operating system. And here is the brutal truth for Series A to IPO leaders. Your moat is not permanent. Your product is not safe. And your biggest threat is not a competitor. It's your own complacency, especially when you are winning. The companies that fail are the ones that start believing their past wins guarantee their future. Think of Intel, stuck in quarterly thinking, missing GPUs and smartphones. Think IBM, losing ground to nimbler software giants. NVIDIA stayed paranoid. They reinvested before validation, bled before the payoff, and acted like a startup even when they were the incumbent. That's what moats really are. Painful, long-term reinvestments that competitors are too comfortable to make. I have sat in boardrooms where leaders spoke proudly about their moat, only to lose it within 2 years. Why? Because they stopped asking the hard questions. They stopped moving with urgency. The NVIDIA way is a reminder. Urgency is not about panic. It's about institutionalizing the hunger of a startup. It's about running a $4 trillion company with the discipline of a Series A team that thinks it has 30 days left until they run out of cash. Let's turn this insight into action. Ask yourself and your leadership team these 3 questions. Do you run your company as if it has 30 days of life left? What's the one bad decision that could end you tomorrow? Are you building a product or a moat that reshapes the industry? Complacency kills, urgency builds. NVIDIA did not win because they were the smartest or the safest. They won because they stayed hungry, paranoid, and willing to reinvent long before anyone else thought it was necessary. If your company feels comfortable today, that's your warning sign. Urgency is not optional. It's the difference between becoming NVIDIA or becoming history. So here we are, my key takeaways from the book. We have covered a lot of grounds today, from a reform school in Kentucky to a boardroom at Sequoia Capital. We have walked through the key moments that forged the NVIDIA way. But now, how do you take these 7 lessons and turn them into a playbook you can use tomorrow in your own company? If I could distill this entire book into a 3-part framework, it would be this. First, build a resilient mindset. Second, create a new category. And third, design a high-velocity culture. Let's unpack each one. The first takeaway is to build a resilient mindset. It's the most foundational lesson, and it starts with you. You must embrace the paradox that greatness is not intelligence. It's forged through pain and suffering. Your job is to stop blaming hard beginnings and start seeing them as your advantage. Because when you can take a hit and keep moving, investors don't just see a good idea, they see a fighter. And the reputation you build through that persistence is your most valuable currency, because it will get you in the door when your pitch fails. The second takeaway for me is to create a new category. Don't just ship features, brand and inevitability. The innovator's dilemma will come for you, and your only defense is to be building the future no one else is brave enough to chase. This is what NVIDIA did with CUDA. They took a long shot, margin-killing bet that looked like a science project, but it created an entirely new market for parallel computing that they now dominate in 2025. Your product may be great, but your vision is what will make you a leader. And finally, my third takeaway is to design a high velocity culture. Your culture is your company's real operating system. Money buys you time, but culture buys you velocity. You must lead with context and not control, and empower your team to act like CEOs of their own accounts. This allows you to scale at startup speed long after you have left the garage. And by rewarding your team with equity and building a culture that ruthlessly kills politics, you can create a moat that outruns any competitor. And these three pillars, mindset, market, and culture, are the non-obvious levers that turned a small chip company into one of the most important businesses on earth. As you know, I review a lot of books on this show. Some are good, some are great, but very few are essential. The NVIDIA Way is one of those essential reads for any founder or investor. I loved this book from the first page to the last. It is not just a historical walkthrough, it's a masterclass in business insights, showing what to look for in a company if you want to increase the odds of building a long-term success story. What struck me most is the central idea. Resilience is not luck, it's engineered. From hiring to culture to compensation, NVIDIA designed a system to attract the best, reward the bold, and compound trust. The 7 lessons we have covered today highlight that focus: relentless pursuit of talent, a culture of excellence over politics, and a discipline to prioritize time and compete on value, not price. But there is a tension here. This is a culture of extreme commitment. It's a street fighter mentality, running as if the company has only 30 days left to live. It asks a lot from people, and it's definitely not for everyone. And that's important. Many great businesses succeed without blunt feedback, survival urgency, or 80-hour work weeks, and that's fine. But for those who aim to change the world, this book argues that NVIDIA level of intensity may be necessary. NVIDIA was venture-backed, and it shows what it takes to move from 0 to 4 trillion in market cap. Too often founders pitch to VCs without realizing what investors are really seeking. They are not looking for an ordinary business case with work-life balance built in. They are looking for Formula One drivers, teams with the ambition and stamina to race at the very highest level in entrepreneurship. Tae Kim captures this with clarity. What it means to build for the podium 30 years out. This book won't tell you to work 80 hours a week, but it will make you reflect on what you are willing to sacrifice and what it really takes to build a generational company. For that reason alone, it is a must read. So, this book is more than a biography, it's a playbook. If you found these lessons valuable and want the full system with all the context, anecdotes, and leadership tools, I can't recommend it enough. You can get the book and support this podcast by using the link in the show notes. I'd also love to hear your personal reflections. What lesson resonated with you the most? What's your CUDA? You can find me on x.com and LinkedIn. Send me a message or share this episode with your key takeaway. And don't forget to tag me so that I can respond to your post. Every signal you send makes the show stronger and helps me bring on more world-class guests to share their real-world lessons. And if you're a founder who's serious about applying these lessons to your own company, let's talk. I help teams put this into action, one lesson at a time. And next time, I will be breaking down a book that will change how you think about innovation by showing why the riskiest ideas are often the safest bets. Stay tuned. And that's a wrap on the NVIDIA Way, one of the sharpest operating manuals for modern leadership I have ever read. Thank you for listening, reflecting, and growing with me. Until next time, stay bold, stay kind, stay curious, and keep building.